Welcome to the 2024 Celebrating a Writer's Journey. We're pleased to have the poet and professor Loren Graham here to tell us about his development as a writer. Interviewing him is Virginia Reeves, also a poet and writer, as well as a board member of the Lewis and Clark Library Foundation, which is sponsoring this event. I'm Lauren Graham, chair of the events committee. The Library Foundation holds 4 major events a year, 3 in the spring and the Ambrose Lecture in the fall. Our main purpose, however, is to fund projects to enhance the ways in which the library serves our county's communities. It is gratifying work. In the years before Loren showed up at Carroll, I taught an introductory poetry class there. One semester, Virginia was my student, as was Patty Borneman, the board's and maids and executive assistant. I remember that class well because they wrote beautiful poetry. Grading that class was a delight. Grading those papers was a delight. Then Loren was hired in 2001, and although I missed teaching poetry, we were happy to have an actual poet teach more advanced sections and direct the fiction classes. Loren has done well by Carroll students. I remember that you mentored Virginia before she left for graduate school. I'm sure you'll learn something of that relationship in the coming hour. And Loren has done well by his writing process, making time to create. We all benefit from that. Please welcome Loren Graham and Virginia.
It's great. It seems like it's working.
Plus, I can hear myself.
I can as well. Okay. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. There are so many previous professors that I had in this room, and students that I've had now as a professor, and it's a beautiful moment in Helena of those all of those things overlapping.
None of my professors are here.
You don't have professors here, Lauren? Well, we're going to start this conversation. I'll just start with a disclaimer that Lauren and I have long conversations together often, and this is nothing new to us. So if I'm going to try to watch the time, but our spouses might be the ones being like, okay, it's time to leave. I had the great fortune, I'm going to just introduce my relationship to Lauren, and that was, I felt that a kind of grave disservice in that I graduated in 2000 and Lauren started at Carroll in 2001. So I never officially had Lauren, no, maybe you started in the fall of 2000?
No, I started in the fall of 2001.
Okay, yeah. So I never officially had Lauren as a professor. However, I went away and did my first graduate degree in education, and came back to Helena and reached out to former professors of mine, Kay Satry and Deb Bernardi, who are still dear friends of mine, and was like, I need to keep writing. And they said, you should reach out to Loren. We have this incredible writing professor here, and you should reach out to him. So, kindness of his heart, he met with a stranger who sent him a story, and we had a cup of coffee at the General Mercantile where one does such things. And his advanced creative writing class was full, but he offered a kind of barter of if I would sit in and be a TA, and maybe I offered this barter, whatever. I offered a barter that he accepted, that if I sat in as a TA in his class and helped give guidance to his students, that he would critique a piece of mine every couple of weeks or so. And so I had this incredible experience of having a true writing mentor workshopping my work. And I, to this day, credit Loren for taking my work from lovely, and the one poem I'm still proud of that I've written is a poem I wrote in Loren's class, of taking my work from a beginning state to a state that was strong enough to propel my career. And Loren remains my most trusted reader. I've gone away to a prestigious writing school, and I have wonderful dear friends who I trust immensely, and I bring my work to Loren. And he just recently finished critiquing my last novel, and I feel so
It's
grateful.
great.
Stay tuned. I feel incredibly grateful for this friendship. So
Likewise.
that's how we met, and
Yeah.
that was just a couple years ago.
Yeah. See, if Virginia had come and asked you the same thing, you would have said yes too. It's her.
Thank you. Thank you. So that is our history. That continues. It is not history, it is present tense. But we are going to focus more specifically on Loren's trajectory and journey as a writer. And we're going to go through this in a somewhat, I'm gonna say, quasi-chronological order via life experiences, not publication dates. And which kind of leads into a whole framing of the night, which I would like to kind of begin with this kind of question of how your own lived experiences have come to play in your creative work.
Yeah. And that is a huge
Yes.
question, so I'll
Right,
answer
so
that in
just-
12 seconds.
Yes,
But, well, it can't help but come to play. You're writing it, not someone else, on the one hand. And on the other hand, I've never written autobiography ever. Well, maybe in my journal, but that's it. I don't write books that are autobiography, and people sometimes think they are, because it is informed by your experience, but it's not the same thing as your experience. And you make a lot of stuff up. Other stuff, I got this from a story that a friend of mine told me, and I just took it and ran with it, or yes, something like this happened to me, but I fixed it up and made it the way it should have happened. And, that's not what really happened. And other times I don't know where I got this from, I just threw it in there.
It just arrived.
And it's funny, though, how powerful that story is, to people. That story that writers do autobiography, and that's all they do. Because when Places I Was Dreaming came out, which is about a kid, it was it was about a kid who has a life sort of like the life I had when I was growing up, and and I used places and stuff that I knew from growing up because, well, it's just the name of the place. No one knows what that is except for me and my family. But my family's, people in my family said, "Oh, I remember every single one of the things in here." Well, that's a nice compliment, because what it means is I made you see that so vividly that you think you remember it, but you don't, because I've made that sucker completely up. It never happened. And okay, and I just said, "Oh yeah, I'm sure you do." I didn't tell them, but I was thinking, no, they're wrong. So, that's, I think your experience, to quote Whitman, sort of fibers and filters everything that you're writing, but it isn't the thing that you're writing.
Yeah.
It's sort of, it gets strained through your experience, but what you're after is what gets, what goes through, not the filter.
Yes. Yeah. Very well said. Will you read a poem for us?
Sure.
From Places I Was Dreaming. If you would start with your first poem,
Yeah.
The House.
Yeah, this was a poem that was meant to sort of, I got it marked and I still can't find it. So, this is a poem that was meant in this book to sort of set the stage for the rest of the book, because there's this house that the kid lives in. Everything else sort of circles this house. Okay, so that's how the book is meant to work. So that's the title, The House. Kids on the school bus claimed it was haunted, claimed no one lived there, said no one could. Dared themselves to go there, got no takers for the 2-story wreck set back from the road, dirt road close by the new subdivision, backed by acres of broom grass and scrub, crookedy tower that never saw paint, house forever gray and falling, whose roof shed fragments continually, green crumbles of asphalt that rained on the yard, on the coal stove that summered on the rotting porch, on the hulks of eviscerated cars that attended. House with ramshackle outhouse behind, with well, with chicken house covered in tin, rusting stock tank, tumble down barns. House of clapboard, warped and gapping, house with bees inside its walls, house rats frequented. Pile of loosening plaster and lath, eyesore clucked at and pitied, object of dread and erosion. Yes, yes, that house. The one I called my house, our house, home. Well, that's how the book starts. It was meant to kind of ambush you there at the end, you know. You go, oh my God, this place is horrible. Oh, you live there.
Oh, it sounds nice.
Yeah, right. It wasn't.
And I asked you to read that one. I mean, that frames the story of this book, I would say, and then also this tendency of, and I wonder. I mean, I've had conversations about this with people from other countries, and this thought that it's uniquely American or Western maybe to need to differentiate between fiction and non, and our desire for the true story.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you are.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right. Just checking.
But this, have you felt that in the reception of this book that there that kind of desire of tell us about this is your story, it is your childhood, it was your home, it was your pain, and that there's almost like a deflating when you're like, well, no, it's actually sifted. It's we create.
We lived in a house something like that. It wasn't so different, but yeah, but that's just the house. There's a whole lot more to this than just the house, of course.
Of course.
So, but it wasn't exactly like that either. So,
Yeah.
you know, so yeah, I mean, yeah, people do that. It's kind of irresistible. As I was saying before, even my family does it, and it's like, no, you know that's not right. You know things are wrong details. But oh no, I remember that exactly. Exactly the way you told them. Okay.
They remember that house.
Yeah.
That house has become the house.
Well, it has, yeah, and I think that, you know, I talk about this in class sometimes. You know, if I say, you know, a house, then you're going to imagine a house that you know. And if I say a White House, you're going to imagine a White House that you know, or you're going to paint a house, your house white, and okay, that's going to be the White House, and we can just keep doing this as long as you want to, because that's what readers do. They just keep adding details to things along with you, and then, okay, and if you do it well, then it seems real, and then they think it is, but of course it's fiction, so it's not really quite real, even though, you know, none of the houses are, you know, metal pods in outer space or anything. They're houses like you've probably seen before, but yeah.
Yeah. May I ask you to read another?
Okay,
Will
absolutely.
you read Encyclopedia? Just Encyclopedia.
Encyclopedia. Will I read the encyclopedia? I don't
Will you
think we
read
have that long.
And for the rest of our time here, Loren will just read it.
I've been told I'm a pretty good reader, so maybe I can bring it up.
I think you could.
Good. Be an accomplishment. It's called Episode of the Encyclopedia Salesman. Yeah, many have heard this one before. I knew better than to ask for things we couldn't afford, and even at 7 had taught myself not to want them. But I wanted those books with the red rectangles on their spines, Collier's huge black volumes that the stranger extracted from his black case and lined up on our linoleum. I knew Grandma thought he had a gun in there. What she always thought about strangers like this one in shiny black shoes and white shirt and dark tie, who sat on the flowered yellow kitchen chair next to our coal stove. And I knew Dad would say, no, we can't pay for them. And Mom would say, no, they're free at the library. that my smart aleck cousin would ask, why don't you show us some big heavy books? I was wrong though. Dad looked straight at me. There's an old car I could overhaul that would bring the money if you think you could use these. The room got quiet. I waited for Uncle Fred to say something like, hell, if he reads all of them, he'll be pretty near smarter than me. But the silence held, a first in that house. So I just mumbled, yes, sir, I expect I could. As though I had no idea, even at 7, of what my yes, sir meant to everyone present. Another month of beans, less coal for the fire, my father spending his winter evenings with a drop light in the unheated barn he used for a garage. The real price of privilege, its great black bulk.
So, I know I shouldn't even ask, but did you get the encyclopedias? Did little Loren get
Actually, we did get those encyclopedias, but it didn't go like that, and Uncle Fred wasn't even there, and,
Yes.
you just go, okay,
Yeah.
you just work it around.
You work it around. You take the details you need to make the scene.
Yeah, right. It doesn't matter whether it happened or not, because, I mean, how could you even write what actually happens? Would it be possible to do that?
Would not.
I don't think it would.
We reimagine it in dialogue, right? So
Sure.
we don't remember verbatim everything that was said.
No, plus there's boring parts that you've got to leave out, because, you think about how many times you eat every day and how many times you go to the bathroom every day and stuff, and you go, I don't want to put all that stuff in there. So
We
it's never going to be that.
Yeah, we appreciate that you don't.
I don't have any poems about that, I don't think.
Thank you. Thank you very much. From that point, tell us a little bit about your journey through, secondary school and going away to college.
Okay, well, I was just blessed to live in, we lived in the country, but near a town with a fantastic school district called Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, which is a big suburb of Tulsa. It's not what it sounds like, a tiny little place. It's, big, quite a bit bigger than Helena. And the school system was excellent. I went to school there, and I had teachers who encouraged me and who encouraged my writing from the time I was in the 2nd grade, when I started giving poems to my teachers. And, they weren't very good, I'm sure, but they said, oh, this is great, you should keep doing this. And, and on through high school, I just had great teachers who just did a lot of stuff for me that never would have happened. And, I probably drove them crazy. Just always like to make people laugh. So, so I did that in class sometimes too. But the teachers laugh too. So I guess it's all right. So most of the time they do. So so I finished up at Broken Arrow High. I got scholarship money enough to pay my full way at Oklahoma Baptist University, and then I moved out to Shawnee, Oklahoma, out there by Oklahoma City, and went to college as a music major. I was writing music at that time, and then I don't know. I was writing music, and all my teachers, especially my English teachers, but my music teachers too, said, you're a really good writer. Maybe you should do that. And so at some point I'm like, yeah, that's probably a good idea. I really am better at that than I am at the other, so all right, I'll do it. But I had to go in music because I had scholarships in music, and that's how I paid for it. So then I just did English on the side, and it worked out okay. All the Carroll kids do that with sports now, but it's the same thing. It's like, well, you say, oh, you're really into track or whatever, and they go, no, I just pay for going here. Oh, okay, I did that too. So then I finished there, and then I worked in a factory for a year because I didn't know what to do, because I come from the kind of background where I got a degree, but 2 degrees if you want to know, because I got an English degree and a music degree. But then what do you do after that? I had no idea. So I just went to work in this bottling factory, And it didn't take very long before I went, okay, I don't know what I want to do, but this is not it. And then I ended up with a fellowship to graduate school at Baylor, and I went down to Texas. And then from there, I got to the University of Virginia, and yeah, there's where I did the MFA, and yeah. And somewhere along the line, I figured out, oh, I could be a professor, couldn't I? So that would be good. I like that.
Oh, that I get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And writing along, how did and you're the first in your family to go to college, you were the first in your family to go to college.
yeah.
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 And you spoke to
I'm
that.
still the only one, except I have one niece who went to college, but
Wow.
Amber and I are the only ones who went.
Wow. How did your family respond?
They thought it was great, and they there's a poem in here about it. So my mom and dad just had this very, very limited idea of what college was, because they'd never been. My dad didn't even go to high school. He finished the 8th grade and then he became an auto mechanic, and he's a really good one, and he's one of the smartest people I know. He doesn't have an education. And so they always said, well, you can do things that none of us can do. You can do stuff that we could never do. And we don't know what it is. You're going to have to figure it out, because we have nothing for you. But you can do it, because we can tell, because we're watching you, and we know you can do this, because you do great in school, and there were stories in those books, so when I was 4 or 5 years old, I was dying to learn how to read, because I knew there were stories in those books, and that's what I wanted. And so I got them, and they always encouraged that. So there's a poem in here where they say, well, there's a great tall school, they say, called a college. You go there, but we can't tell you anything about how to get there. You're going to have to figure that out on your own, because we don't know. And it's typical of the family in this book, where they're all talking at the same time. So there's a poem with 2 voices in it, because they're both talking to the kid at the same time, and he's sort of mentally assembling what they say together as though it were one person, and it doesn't completely make sense, because the sentences don't overlap the right way, but that's...
The meaning comes through.
Yeah, but the meaning comes through, because the meaning... if you live in a family like that, you just learn to listen to 6 people at the same time. It's not really that big of a problem. But sometimes things get a little mixed up. Well, okay. With me, sometimes things get a little mixed up anyway, so...
With all of us, yeah.
So, yeah. So...
Yeah, that's a very, I think, honest and supportive role for your parents, and that I teach at Helena College, and we have a lot of students who are first generation, and there's that sense of nobody told me what to do here or how to do this, and there are some students who feel though that there's this separation afterwards of like, oh, you've gone and done this thing called college that is foreign to me, and we are no longer the same, and there's this divide.
Yeah. And I've never felt that in my family once.
That's awesome.
It's just sort of, and I cultivate that. I don't go home and talk about, deconstruction or anything. Yeah, or Beowulf. Yeah, I don't do that. I teach that in class, but I don't talk about it at home. I go home, I call my dad every Sunday, and we usually talk about cars, because he's a mechanic, and he tried to teach me to mechanic. I wasn't very good at it. But I learned enough that I could talk to him about things. And so, we do that. And talk about, I don't know, just stuff.
Yeah.
And so,
just stuff.
Just stuff. Just like, he's got this land he's trying to sell, and I'm going, well, that's worth more than you think it's worth, and stuff like that. So, I just try to be his son like I've always been, because I want to maintain this relationship. But I think that's what everybody does with everybody.
or hopefully.
Because I'm not exactly the same when we're sitting in the windbag, going 900 miles an hour on our writing as I am in class, right? Because
Absolutely.
you can't be, it's not the same thing, so.
Yeah,
okay,
we context shift.
I think that's okay, yeah.
Absolutely.
Right,
Absolutely.
yeah.
All right, speaking of context shifting, let's move to another book. Yeah, did you see how I set you up?
No, that was a good segue there.
Thank you, thank you. So we're gonna move on to Mose,
Yeah,
which was actually your first
it was my first book, yeah.
book.
You can tell because it's not in color.
So first books of poetry have black and white images. Oh my God.
I thought it was going to be in color when I picked that painting for it, but no, it wasn't. It would have been way better because it has a yellow angel right there. It just pops out of that painting. It's Max Beckman. I saw it in the National Gallery.
Is this the yellow right here?
No, it's right there. You see, you can barely even see it.
White.
Yeah, it was way better in my imagination than it is there. And it's a Max Beckman painting. It's about the size of that screen over there. It was hanging in the National Gallery, and I walked through there looking for my book cover, and I saw that, and I went, that's it.
That's the one.
But then they didn't do it in color, and I went, well, it's just not very good.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, right.
Welcome to the world of publishing.
Yeah, that's about the size of it. They did make these nice hardcovers with my signature on the front.
Look at that. Where are those ones?
Well, they're all gone. This was the first one that came off the press,
Oh.
but all the others got sold. So.
Well, I didn't know you then, so I can't hold it against you. It's fine.
Yeah, maybe one will appear.
Maybe.
I'll let you, Virginia.
Maybe, if it does, I claim it. So, talk about this writing process. Talk about, your first collection is, you talk about this as one poem, really,
It really is.
collected into a book. It can be read in sections, but it's really one continuous piece.
Yeah.
And what was the process of finding this story?
Well, I just got to Virginia, and University of Virginia, and I wanted to do a new writing project, and I wanted it to be really different from anything I had ever done before. I've written lots of poems, published quite a few poems already, not a book though. And so I had been writing these little short haiku-like things, before when I was at Baylor, and I went, okay, I'm going to just try to go completely the opposite direction. I'm going to try to write this sprawling sort of, quasi-epic or, soap epic is what I ended up calling this to my friends, because it's just got too many twists and turns in it. But so I was just trying to do something different, I was trying to do something that I hadn't seen anybody else do, and I think I did. But lots of people do this sort of thing now, but they didn't then. I had taught in the prisons in Texas, and so I was. So I had some background. I wasn't a prisoner in Texas, though. This is not an autobiography. I was teaching prisoners. I was not myself a prisoner. Although sometimes I felt like a prisoner. But anyway, that's a whole different subject. But, so I went, okay, I'm just sort of imagining this prisoner. And I named it Mose, like Moses, because I want the law. I want him to be totally trapped by the law, right? Someone who just can't escape and you can't move around. And yet I thought of him as being a knight errant, like in the medieval poems, about a knight going out on a quest. He's kind of on a quest, but he can't go anywhere. And that was sort of where I started. And then I said, okay, what can you do if you're a knight on a quest, but you're locked up? And then I just got things from the prisoners that I had known. You could just say to the prisoners in the Texas Department of Corrections where I taught, you say, how many? And they would say 1,734. And what you just asked them is, how many days do you have left? And they know exactly how many days they have left. Every day they're counting it down. So I made that the framework of the book with just numbers that count down, starting from 1743, or 41 rather, and then just going down, and then it skips some days, but the book sort of tells you early on what these numbers are, so then you go, oh, I see, these are days, so now you can tell how long it is between these sections because you know the number. And so he's counting down. He doesn't get out.
No, we're still there.
He still has over 1,500 days left, almost 1,600 when it's over. But anyway, so that was the framework, and then I just tried to think of the language that those guys, and when I taught the women's unit and men's both, but I'm just trying to think of the way they talk about things, you know. Like they called the guards bosses, the boss. And you never heard anybody say the guard, boss. That's what they said. And the overseer of the bosses of the guards was called the captain, even though I don't think he had bars on his uniform or anything. That's just what they called him. And so with stuff like that, and then they all have jobs, I mean, I think that's another thing I think people have misconceptions about, what people do in prison, but all of these people had jobs, most of which in Central Texas was what they called shoveling peanuts, that is digging peanuts out of the ground with a shovel. That's what they did all day. And they got paid 10 cents an hour for doing that, which they could spend in the PX, and they didn't have anywhere to spend their money, so they didn't make very much. But so I tried to kind of I'm just collecting all this stuff, and I'm watching. Oh, there goes a little school bus looking sort of thing, but it's white and it's got bars over the windows. Okay, I'm using that, and so yeah, you see what I mean? It's like filtered through your experience, but it isn't your experience because there's no teacher in here. There's nobody doing what I did, even appearing in the book anywhere.
Yeah.
Because it's about a guy who's in there, and he's really in love with this woman who technically is now his half-sister, but that's just because her mother and his father married each other, and that was after they were, Mose and Gracie were already a couple, so now he's just sort of feeling weird and confused about that, because now you're in love with your sister, but it's not really your sister, but it sort of is, and so he's just...
Your parents are married.
Yeah, trying to sort this out, And so he has lots of hallucinations about her. He sees her all the time. Of course, she's not really there, but he talks to her all the time too. And he's kind of he doesn't have an education. He has the voice of my grandmother. I guess that's an autobiographical element in there, but no one would ever know except me. I just made him talk like my grandma because I liked the way she talked. She had all these old-timey expressions that were so weird. No, that's really good. I'm putting that in here. She used to say everything was heavy as a dead preacher. If it's not, that's what she would say. Oh, that's heavy as a dead preacher. Oh, I got that in there. That's too good to pass up.
Grandma.
I couldn't get half of the stuff she said in here, but I got as much as I could. And just also her, she would not always put the words in the order that I would have put them in, and I like that too, so I used that as well. So.
And in our conversations about this, you talk about how Mose he's processing, right? He's trying to figure things out, and he's trying on belief systems, essentially. And can you speak a little bit to kind of that process of exploration?
Yeah. Well, I think Mose is what a friend of mine used to call a refugee from fundamentalism, and I was too, so I know what that feels like. So, all right, I'll use that. No. Does that mean I'm Mose? Of course not. I haven't been in prison. Well, I've been in the prison, but not in prison. So, okay, using that. So I made it in the book like he feels called to be a preacher, and everybody in the prison calls him preacher, but they call him because one of the guards said he got knocked over onto a pile of stickers one day, and when they were picking him up, the boss, the guard, said, damn, heavy as a dead preacher. And so they started calling him preacher because of that, not knowing that he actually wanted to be a preacher at one point, that he doesn't anymore. And so he writes to Gracie and says, well, they took to calling me preacher in here, pretty funny if they only knew, But then he sort of recounts at one point how he thought God was telling him to be a preacher, and he kind of concludes at the end, well, I don't think that's what was really happening. I think I was just sleepy and kind of cold. And that's really all it was.
Yeah.
You
Will you read the piece that we had talked about that isn't?
Yeah. It's 1650. That's what it is. Yeah.
Day 1650.
Day 1650. He's kind of a homespun philosopher because he just sits in there trying to figure out, what should I do and who am I really? And he's a young man. He's a kid really. So 1650. I've thought a lot on how I landed up in here. Mostly, you can't make sense of it. Like, why didn't I stop myself before I'd done it? I don't know. I'm not trying to get out of it, Gracie. I deserve being here, but not because I decided to do it just right out of a blue sky. Actual reasons, I didn't have none. And when things started, it was like playing. I never meant it to turn real, but it was already headed for real before I was ready, and I thought to myself, now it's too late. It makes me think there's another world underneath this one, and everything there is backwards to what we want. I know I'm not in this hole for having pimples on my face, but it seems like most things start up down there, where it's dark and slick and no handholds anywhere.
So a belief system around dark and slick and no handholds.
Yeah, right. Well, just, you formerly were just so sure of the world you were in, and now you're really sure you don't know anything, and everything starts up someplace that you aren't in control of whatsoever, and even when you're in it, there isn't anything to hold on to, and you're liable to just fall.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a long way from thinking you were called to be a preacher, but that's most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to have you read another poem, Hardy's, but we need to focus on you and move on. So that we have time for a Q&A too.
Okay.
So let's move on to completely out of order. So we went from the book that was published, or most recent, to the first, to the middle. So we're coming to the Ring Star now. Second books get color covers.
Right.
Apparently.
Plus, I knew the artist, and so I called her to ask her if I could use this painting, because I liked that it was houses with no doors and windows and trapped people inside, in other words, which is sort of what this book is about. And I got her answering service, and they said, well, we'll have her call you, but she can't talk to you right now because she's painting a ceiling in the Louvre in Paris. Oh, okay, I guess that's a good excuse.
I'll look forward to hearing.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's
but
good.
she called me back and she said, yeah, I'd love to do your book cover. So she painted about like 10 of these and said, pick the one you like the best.
Oh,
Very nice.
amazing.
Yeah. It's great.
So wonderful cover. And let's start with reading in this one. If you will do, or we can we'll set up the premise and then give us these two that I've suggested. Requested.
Requested, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, commanded. You're reading these, Loren. I don't want to hear it. Okay. The idea of this book is that is that they're alternating poems, and they're in the voices of a divorcing couple whose names are Emmy and Dawn. And I'll tell you the reasons I chose those names if anybody wants to know. And I don't know anyone named Emmy or Dawn. That wasn't the reason. Okay? So they've already separated when the book starts, but you know how when you have an ex, you tend to have conversations with them when they're not there? Well, that's what both of these people are doing. They're talking to each other, even though the other person isn't there anymore. And through their talking to each other, we can mentally assemble the story of what happened to them. And that's the premise. His poems are all sonnets, and her poems are, the love poem that's now the divorce poem, right? I thought that was witty, so I did it. Her poems are poems that are deliberately made to be as unsonnet-like as I could possibly imagine, because I was trying to use those forms to drive those two voices apart and make them not both sound like me, which is always the thing you have to think about. Okay, how are you going to keep that from happening? Well, in this book, that's how I was going to keep that from happening. So they're both sort of talking to each other, even though they don't live in the same town even anymore. But they do see each other sometimes, and then they talk to each other later, and we find out, oh, they saw each other.
So the first section is called Imaginary Conversations, and I'm going to ask Loren to read two poems, one from Dawn's perspective and one from Emmy's.
Yeah, Imaginary Conversations was going to be the title of the whole book, but the publisher didn't like it, so they do that.
Oh, don't even get me started on titles.
I don't know what they'd be willing to do. You gotta go along because you want them to publish the book. This is a poem of Dawn, and these are, see that far in the book, very early, right at the beginning of the whole thing. He's thinking about the way they don't talk to each other. Would there be a language in which they could still talk to each other? And so it's called The Language of Birds. There are some birds that say their names when they call, and then other birds that don't, and that's part of the poem too. So, oh, for a language of birds to say ourselves, to call us as the chickadee calls itself, chickadee, and the phoebe likewise, and the whippoorwill, and the jay. Or to summon ourselves in a subtler vein, the towhee with his endless drink your tea, or that low trembling whistle in which we perceive the misnamed screech owl's secret name. Could we then meet ourselves in all of these and form from them that one call of our own that would lay claim to us? And would it shear away the distance and the constant drone of traffic and TV? And would we hear again the flicker's laughter in the trees? Thanks. Don always sounds elegant because he got sonnets. So you don't make them sound like that. And with her, you're deliberately trying to not do that. So I was thinking, part of the reason I named her Emmy is because I was thinking of the way Emily Dickinson poems sound with these big gaps in them. She has all those dashes. So her poems are just full of pauses. And I went, oh, that's good. Just that. I didn't use dashes, I just left a big gap in the middle of the line, which probably to most people would say there's supposed to be a pause here. So this poem is called Admission, and it's an Emmy poem. Ochre detritus under naked rose stems, sepals like crushed insects, clenching, withered, blossom heads, blasted, whose collapse I observed, aloof, annoyed at first with this token you presented for admission, to shut doors, or was it a question as to their opening? Dissolved, those blooms, shadows, those petal remnants persisting. Please, no more questions. No, questions?
Talk about the way the natural world works its way into your work. Because both of those very much conjured.
Yeah. Well, it's such an important part of my experience in my life. I can't keep it out. It's going to get in there. Just it's going to get filtered just like everything else, and it's going to do some of the filtering, and that's, I don't see how you can stop that, because I think writers all have certain obsessions. There's certain things that you just keep coming back to, and it's like you can't help it. You have to come back to this. There's no way around it. Okay, then you come back to it, right? You just hope you come back to it in a different way than you did before, but it's going to be there. So with Mose, it's the peanut field. He's out there a lot, and it's grimy and horrible, and then he goes back to his cell and has a hallucination, and in many cases, which he's at the farm or something where he grew up, and so those things just keep coming back, and then in the Ring Scar, Don lives in the country and Emmy lives in the city, and yes, I've been divorced, and no, that's not autobiographical. She lives in a city that has a subway, and my first wife and I, when we divorced, we lived in different places, but neither one of us lived in the city. She lived in a small town, and I lived in the middle of nowhere, but okay, that's not the same thing. And we didn't have any of these conversations. I made all of that stuff up. So, but I mean, if he's gonna live out there, there's no way to keep the countryside out of it.
Yeah.
And lots of her poems have these cityscapes in them, which interests me too. The way, she has poems where she's in the subway and she's sort of seeing that, like when you pass another subway car in the subway, it looks like a piece of film that's gone off the sprocket, and it's, all those windows are, making this movie in your mind, but it's not, it's going sideways. And, so you're just kind of drawing on the surroundings of these people in that case. And then, in Places I Was Dreaming, well, the kid lives on a farm, and everything he thinks about has something to do with the place he lives in, starting with the house and going right through to, the end of the whole book, where he's, in the last poem, he's walked out onto this pond when the ice is on. And he knows you're not supposed to do this because this is in Oklahoma. The ice doesn't get that thick, and you can easily fall through and drown. And so he walks out there anyway, and he, goes back to the house, and, afterwards he's walking on the pond, and all of these cracks are shooting out, and he kind of thinks, I better get off of this. And so he walks back up to the house, and we just get this kind of recap of everything he's seen the whole way through, which is the same thing we saw before, this house and this broken down farm, and, and it's muddy, dirty, and the grass is all dead. It's not very pretty, but, it's still home, just like it said in the last line of the first poem there. So, okay, this is who you are.
That poem is called The Time I Didn't Drown.
Yeah.
Which is a great title. Will you treat us to a poem from your collection that you're working on right now?
Yeah, should I talk about it at all, or just read the poem? How much time we got?
I think you should just read the poem.
Just have to read the poem.
And then we'll let people ask questions.
Not allowed
if they
to
want
talk about it.
if they read the poem and then walk away.
Okay, so, well, I gotta say something or else it won't make sense, because it only makes sense in context, but the book that I'm working on is all intersects at fly fishing, and lots of it isn't about fly fishing, it's there someplace. And it's in this one too. And the poem is called Reading the Water. And it means something that fly fishers do. You look at the surface of the water, and having done this enough times, you know what's underneath there by looking at what's on that surface. And you know where the fish are because you can see what's underneath there, even though you can't see it. You can just see the signature it makes on the surface. You go, I know, there's a big rock right there, and there's probably a fish sitting right next to it. So I'm throwing it in there, and how do I know that? Well, it's like the stream surface makes words and letters that you can read. You can just read the water. That's why we talk about it that way. So that's what this poem is. Reading the water. Reading is always a depth if you know how to read a surface. If reading is more than letters, more than mere eye movement. When you read a poem, for example, you have to read one sentence at a time, not one line at a time. Yet you have to read one line at a time at the same time, because the line is the music and the sentence is the meaning, even though the line also has a meaning and the sentence a music of its own. The water likewise has a music, which in the ear nearly anyone can hear, but another music unfurls itself in the line as it hushes through the guides and drops to the river almost inaudibly, yet in a splash audible to the eyes. A visual sound, then, a sight that can be heard. In the same way, you see something you can't see under the surface of the water because the turbulence it creates tells you where it is and how large and how deep, and then you know where a fish may be lurking. You might tell yourself it's a feeling or a hidden meaning, but it isn't quite, because the signs are all there. The letters and words of the surface of the river, the spelling they make of something that goes from topside riffle all the way to the stream bed. It isn't hidden, not at all. It's plain as clear water, plain as what we see, plain as anything we've ever read. Virginia helped me on that.
All of this next collection is a mix of, I'm really excited about the next collection. It's a mix of poetry and essays and stories with a theme of fishing flowing through them. And of course, as we know, when we write about fishing, we're not just writing about fishing. And so they all have hidden meanings, if you will.
Hidden meanings, yeah.
And not
that are readily visible. I used to say it was hidden meanings like, you remember this bit? Or I used to say it was hidden meanings like I would hide Easter eggs for my niece when she was like 4. Like I hide one in the middle of the sidewalk, hide one on the step where she probably just stepped on it because she didn't see it. Well, okay, they're hidden if you don't know how to look for them. But
if you know how to look.
You know how to look for them.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, I love it. Thank you. We are going to turn it over to you. Do you have any questions for Loren? I've asked all of mine. I mean, I can keep talking, but I won't.
Oh, Virginia and I could keep talking for hours without taking a breath.
We won't.
We're professors.
Well, I would like to ask
Yeah.
first, congratulations on your poems.
Thanks, Sergio.
I have a question. As a musician, somebody who studied music, music informs your writing. I'm talking about the structure or the form, or I don't know, the rhythm, the tempo.
Yeah, I think that language has a kind of music in it, as I was saying right there. But yeah, I mean, there was a time there when I was writing in because I studied classical music and studied as a classical composer and was trying to do that sort of thing. And I was trying to go, okay, how can I write a poem that has the form of a symphony? Or how can I write a poem that's a toccata and fugue or whatever, and I thought a lot about that, and I still think about that. And the poems I tried to do that way didn't work out to my satisfaction, but they were still interesting things to do, because you go, yeah, there's this form, and it's not limited to just music. You can transfer that to anything you want to. So I did. I just didn't think it was very good in the end, but it was a good idea. I may go back to it sometimes. So.
Kind of a follow-up question. Do you think that English has any particular tempo? 6/8 or 4?
No, not like that. But I was just teaching the sonnet in class today. I was talking to students about how often English is iambic. It has a rhythm that has an unaccented syllable followed by an accented syllable. So it goes ta-dum, 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 ta-dum. It does that all the time. So we're talking in class about, you could watch some kind of talk TV like CNN or the Weather Channel or something like that, and you would hear iambic speech, because we do it all the time. And I was even pointing out, as I was talking in class, I was pointing out, oh, that was iambic speech right there. But I was saying, well, you're watching the Weather Channel and you hear the weather person say, a storm is coming from the west. A storm is coming from the west, and you go, that was iambic tetrameter. The person didn't mean it to be. Just English just sounds like that, because it has a lot of one-syllable words, and they're accented, and they tend to come at the end, and it makes that happen. And if you were, if you're writing in Italian, it wouldn't sound like that. It doesn't do that. Or French.
Do you write in other languages then?
Oh, I have, not very well. I've studied some other languages, but I'm much better at writing in English than anything else. But Sarah was good.
Yeah. How did you get into classical music, given your upbringing?
That's a good one, isn't it? When I was in high school, I was writing songs for myself to sing and this buddy of mine. We played guitars and sang all the time. We just did it for fun. But I started writing these songs, and we started singing these songs, and it, kind of made a little bit of a hit in my hometown. And then the choir teacher asked me to start writing these songs for the choir. So I started doing that. And then I got a music scholarship to go to Oklahoma Baptist, and so I did it, because otherwise I didn't know how to pay for it. And when I got there, it was all about classical training, and so I needed to keep my scholarship. So I went, all right, I'll do that. I'm game for whatever, right? I'll try anything. So I tried it, and it worked out pretty well. I wrote some music that made a pretty good hit there, too. And I wrote a ballet for my senior recital and had it performed. I got together with these dancers that I knew, and they did it. And, it was, and my worst enemy came up to me afterwards and said, that's the best recital I've ever been to in my whole life. And that was pretty good. So, but as with so many things, when you come from where I come from, I didn't know what to do next. So I went to work for the bottling factory, and then, somebody said, you're really a writer. Why don't you go to graduate school and, study writing? I said, all right, that's a good idea. So, all right, I did.
So I'm curious how you got to Carroll. Was that from Virginia?
Yeah, I was. I had three. Was it three? Yeah, 3 different teaching jobs in Virginia. 2 of them lasted 4 years or more. They're supposed to be 1-year jobs, but they kept hiring me back. And so I was on the last year of one of those jobs, and you're just looking for places you can apply. And there was some place called Carroll College that wanted somebody who sounded pretty much like me, and so I applied, and then you know, Ron Stottlemyre called me up and said, we want to have you over here for an interview, and, you know, and then I called him really early in the morning several times because I didn't realize what the time difference was. Oops. And then you go, oh, well, okay, didn't get that job, did I? Stay on it. So, all right. So I just answered an ad, that's all.
But you've been pleased to fish here.
I have been,
And to
I've
teach.
been very
And to teach.
pleased to fish and teach and meet people that I like, all of that stuff.
I was just wondering how long you were at the prison and what creative methods you used to get your students into the excited mode for writing.
Well,
Do tell.
it's surprising how excited about writing they are the minute they walk in the door. Because it's a self-selecting group, right? Because first of all, it's considered a privilege to be able to go to class there. And so you don't get to do it if you have any strikes against you. And as a matter of fact, when I was teaching in the TDC, the Texas Department of Corrections, they gave you a pink pad when you walked into the room every time. And if you wrote someone's name on it, that pad, and handed it to the guard as you left, that person would never be back to your class again. And I never did that, even though there were some people in there I don't like very much. But it's like, wow, you know, I'm not taking that away from anybody, whether I like them or not. And so I would give them these assignments, you know, for writing, and they would inevitably write a story or a poem or an essay or whatever kind of class it was, and it was always about how some imaginary character, or maybe themselves, and how they got where they are now. That's what they all talked about. And so part of Mo's was to go, well, you know what somebody in here is going to do? They're going to tell you their story. So, okay, I'm just going to make up a guy called Mose, and he's just going to tell you the story. So I'm just following the lead. And
Were any of their things published, or did you use any of their wording verbatim to put into your book?
No, I didn't put any of their wording in my book, because I regarded that as something that belonged to them, not to me. But I did, I had this relationship with a librarian at Baylor, that he was the librarian of the Texas collection at Baylor, where all the Texas government documents and all the stuff that belongs to the government got stored there. And I mean, they had massive amounts of stuff. And you think of like the Historical Society up here in Helena, only it's quite a bit bigger than that. They have so much stuff, and so I got to know this guy, just both employees of the college, and so I started taking my classes over there so they would know what a closed stack library was and how to use one. And so, you know, we sort of became friends. And so then when I started on this thing, I wrote him, his name was Kent Keith, very, very nice guy. And I wrote Kent up, and I was in Virginia by that time, but I wrote him up in Texas, and I said, you got anything about that would interest me about prisons? He knew what I was going to work on. And he goes, well, you know, he wrote back, I'll look, you know, I'll hunt up some stuff for you. You know how I agree. He wanted to help me, so okay. So he sent me this thing that was, it was a mimeograph sheet that looked like it was probably from the 30s or the 40s maybe. And it was called the Punishment Manual. And it was a list of all of the things that the guards were allowed to do to prisoners and to what degree they were allowed to do these things if the prisoners didn't do what they wanted, what the bosses wanted them to do. And some of the things in there were just, you go, holy cow. So I picked up some things from that and just put them straight in the book. But Mo says, oh, it's the punishment manual, and it's supposed to be expired, but we don't know if it's really expired or not. And everybody's seen it, and so it describes things like how long can you be made to stand on a barrel in one position? You know, well, you can't do that for more than 2 hours or something like that. You know, and how big does a dark cell have to be? Well, it has to be at least 7 feet tall and 4 feet wide, and it has to have adequate ventilation. That's what it's, and I was like, I can't write something better than that. I'm just using that, you know. So that stuff is in there. And so, and then you know, there's different things that Mose reads in there, and then there are things that he writes, which is him talking to Gracie, and then there's a kind of an outside narrator who sometimes tells us what he's doing. So you got sort of a cubist work there with three different points of view operating at the same time, and that punishment manual is one of those things that he's reading, and he reads lots of other things too. Somebody sends him a bunch of newspaper clippings about himself, but there's no return address or anything. He doesn't know who sent them, and so he's reading these things about his incarceration, his trial, and all this stuff. So it's just another way that we can get his story out there. But so just use different typefaces to indicate those different things, and that way you can sort of lay them over each other and make weird sounds out of it. That's what all composer poets want to do, is just make a lot of weird sounds. Yeah.
Let's somehow come together. Let's do it.
Virginia mentioned that you tap into nature. Is there something specific here in Helena that allows you to sensory recall Broken Arrow?
Oh, well, that's a really nice question. Yeah, you know, there is, because there's a sense, and I've written about this in the book that Virginia's read already, but I've only read the whole last poem for him this time. But there's a sense when you're on a trout stream, or any stream, really fishing, that you're on every stream that you've ever been on, because they all are sort of alike. It's like when you read a book, you're reading all the other books you read before, you know, this works the same way. And so, yeah, lots of things, you know, call me back to the past, but, you know, but those are just kind of memories. They don't necessarily enter into anything I'm writing. You just go, oh, yeah, you know, I'm fishing on the Missouri with Eric Pratt, who's back there, and, you know, and I'm going, oh, yeah, this is, I was on the Arkansas there for a minute. No, this is the Missouri, not the Arkansas. That's where you fish for catfish at home, so, yeah, no, I'm not fishing for catfish, but, yeah. It sort of seems like you are for a minute, though, until you go, oh, no, wait.
Those ways that our different locations overlap with each other and conjure each other.
Yeah.
And both are and aren't the same.
Yeah. Yeah, I think every time you fish a stream, you're fishing all the streams you've ever fished before. Maybe ones you've never fished before. You know, maybe somehow you're channeling the next one you're going to. I don't know.
But then you're also never fishing the same stream twice.
Heraclitus says so, yes. It must be true.
All right, let's do one more question. Yes.
So as a writer, who do you read?
Oh, good one. Good one.
I take these spells, you know, and I read a lot of different things, different kinds of things, but I tend to read them in batches. Like I've been reading a whole lot of books about fishing because I'm writing a book that's sort of about fishing. I sort of think it's not really about fishing. That's just the vehicle. Yeah. And so, yeah. And then I was on a jag there for a while where I was just reading every Cormac McCarthy book, you know, and I read lots of different things. Sometimes I read critical books and I'm getting ideas for this book out of books that are books of literary criticism. They're books that are about other books. And it's not anything like the kind of thing I'm going to write. It's just, oh, well, that gives me an idea, because here we are, you know, reading a book, I don't know, about Chaucer, whom I teach, and I go, oh yeah, I think I can do something. You know, there's an idea right there. I think I can turn that around and make it be about fly fishing somehow, and I can write an essay about that, or I can write a story or another poem or whatever, right? So. I think if you're a writer, it's like everything just goes in and gets chewed up and turns into writing. And so, you know, is that your life? Yeah, but it's everything else too. It's not just your life. It's just, you're just pulling things in and you're just looking for anybody who will set you off. And that could be almost anything. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you everyone for being here.